Okay. So I will call us to order at 6:33, Morgan. That's what my computer says.
Okay. And you do have one
our
visitor.
Oh, thank you. Should we recognize our visitor? Do you know who it is, Morgan?
Hi, it's just Ann again. I missed the last meeting. I apologize.
We're going to make you an unofficial board member if you keep coming.
Or administrator if you're not careful.
That's a great idea. No, I'm just here. I'm just here listening in. You're all doing a great job. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Morgan, I'm guessing that's Caroline in the waiting room. Do you want me to take care of that? You were muted, Morgan, so I'm going to assume you said yes.
I said I will let them in. Lenny was in there as well.
Okay. Hi, Lenny. Okay, so our consent agenda tonight includes our previous minutes and the first readings of some policies. Do we want to talk about any comments, questions, or concerns about those? I have a question. We didn't have an equity policy before this, Lynn?
We did not.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that.
We took the model policy from the VSBA and we
Gotcha.
reviewed it through the policy committee.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have a quick question, just procedural, really, Lynn. The name change for the district school choice procedure, was that just kind of for clarity's sake that you're changing the name?
Yes, because nobody can get inter and intra right. Nobody understands the difference between the two. So
okay.
The proposal is just to call it cross district, which seems to be more clear that it is the circumstance where we have a child going from the NMB side to the ER side. That's that geographic one. We had a lot of confusion in the fall about that.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
And I have a question because the only policy I saw was the class size one. I must have missed the others. Where are they?
They were in the board packet that Doreen sent. Yeah.
Okay, she sent class size separately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked her to send class size separately because in my report I'm doing the class size policy, and I want you to tell me actually if I'm over sending you stuff, because I thought I had heard people say that sometimes when you get the agenda you can't click the links within it. Is that true?
Sometimes.
So I just asked her to send the things that were live linked in to you separately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about the consent agenda or its items? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the consent agenda and the first readings of the policies.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. By roll, John?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Miranda? Lisa? I saw you say yes, Miranda. Lisa?
Yes.
And Mary?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any adjustment to our agenda tonight, Lynn?
No.
Okay. And we chatted with Ann. Any other comments you wanted to make, Ann, or any other visitors, Morgan?
No other visitors.
Okay. Christy, are we doing a school? I see your school is listed in our school spotlight section.
Yep.
Okay, great. You can go ahead however you'd like to handle that.
You want me to start now?
Sure.
All right.
Can I share my screen?
You should be able to now.
Okay. All right. So, okay. We are doing a virtual open house. This hasn't gone live to our families yet. We have a series of YouTube videos all attached together. You watch the first couple ones, and then then you can skip through them if you want to. So if you only have a student in 4th grade and you really only want to watch that one, that's all you have to. Or you could watch them all. They're all really short. But I did do a little bit about the building renovation, so I thought that I would share that with you today. It's an overview, so there's a couple other things in there besides building, but I did take some pictures. I wish I would have waited till today, but that would have been hard to get all this done, I suppose, because there's a little bit more done since I put this together last week. So
That's good news, Christy.
Yeah. Let's see. Welcome, Sheldon Bear families. This fall reopening was months in the planning. And now that we finally have your kids back at school, it has all been worth it. We have had a fabulous start, and we are so happy to have them here, even if it's only with us 2 days a week. So once again, we welcome our students back, and we want to remind you about our Bear expectations. Sheldon Elementary is creating a community where all kids belong. We are engaged in learning. We act kindly. We are responsible for ourselves, for our school, and for one another. And above all, we strive to stay safe. Our building renovation began way back in the spring, and we are moving into the final stages, finally. We cannot wait until we can all get together so we can show off our new look. Until then, here's a few photos. Our gym and our locker rooms received a much needed facelift. Hopefully soon, we'll be able to gather there together and to open it up to the public so you can see how fabulous it looks. Our new handicapped accessible bathrooms allow our building to welcome all our families and all of our students. Our school has also completed our asbestos abatement plan by retiling the main office, the main corridors, and the adjacent office spaces. New doors and windows are energy saving and help us stay safe by allowing for quick access back into or out of the buildings. A remodel of our front entry helps also both with energy efficiency and allows us to limit access into the rest of the building as quickly as possible if necessary. Finally, we are just beginning our most visible improvement, the new siding. The combination of sturdy metal and warm, inviting wood will look beautiful once it's done. If you drive by and take a look at the front, we already have a big section completed. Thank you all so much for your support. We look forward to the celebration of our building completion with all of you as soon as we can. Take care and enjoy the rest of our open house. Christy, I'm kind of in love with that Sheldon Bear with a little construction hat on.
We hope you're enjoying the virtual open house.
Whoops, hold on.
For those of you who don't know us, I'm Heidi Starr, PTO president. And I'm Amanda Moran, PTO treasurer.
There we go. Sorry. The Sheldon Bear.
Yeah, the one that has the construction hat on. He's my favorite. Yeah.
Our art teacher drew it last year.
Nice job. I'm really thankful for those photos because I haven't seen any of it. So it looks great. I'm sure you're all super excited.
So one whole side of the front and then around the corner is already done. And they've started on the back, but when I took the pictures, it wasn't.
Yeah. The ADA bathrooms, I mean, that's just huge leap forward. I'm so glad that we were able to get that done. That's so incredibly important. So I'm glad that's done.
They look great.
Awesome. Did you have anything else for us, or does anyone else have questions for Christy?
I just want to say that it's beautiful. That's awesome. And that was really fun to watch. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Okay, Lynn, I think it's up to you now.
Did you mute me, Morgan? I must have done that to myself.
Nope.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with some personnel things just to go over with you. One is that we're very excited that we have hired a facilities manager for our NMV schools. That has been a goal of ours for quite some time. And I think I think I can speak for the principals, although we haven't really talked about this. They have got to be very excited to have someone helping with all of the facilities decisions that tend to fall on their lap. So we're very excited. Kelly Backus is going to be starting on Monday with us. So we'll look forward to welcoming him. I think Morgan's plan early next week is to bring him around to meet the principals and allow him the opportunity to get to see the buildings and such. So exciting stuff. I will want you to make a motion to hire Kelly Backus. So his is a little different. His contract is a little different. So I would like a motion from the board on that one.
I'll
Would
make
like
that
to make-
motion.
Thank you, Lisa. By roll, John,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Miranda. I can't see you, Miranda. Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Okay, thank you. Lisa
Yes.
and Mary.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all.
Next up is just informational. Bakersfield has hired a paraeducator, Megan Bapp, who's a local lady, is already working there as a paraeducator. So next up is your administrators a couple of them are due for administrator negotiations. So we kind of have your 4 on a bit of a cycle at this point. So this year, Christy and Lenny are both up for negotiations. It is a little bit of a strange year. So I wanted you to consider when you would like your administrators to bring you a proposal, whether you would like them to bring it to you in November or if you'd like them to bring it to you in December. Or something else. We typically do it in the fall for budgeting purposes.
Are there any budgetary impacts if we pick one month over another? Not necessarily, I suppose, right?
I think the goal is to just be able to have a couple of meetings. So if you make an offer and then get a counter, that you have a couple of months to wrap it up. So the goal in the past has been to get this negotiation process concluded by January so that your budget accurately reflects.
Then I'd like to propose that we discuss it at the November meeting or have the proposals brought to us in November.
Okay.
Yep, I would be in favor of that also.
Me as well.
More times better than less.
Okay. You will also, when we hired the facilities manager, we gave him a 1-year contract, and you will need to negotiate with your facilities manager. I do not recommend that you do that right away. I think that you should try him out for a little bit first. He's brand new to us, so I don't think you should be negotiating with him until at least April or May. Does that sound reasonable?
Does to me, yeah.
Yeah, it
Alright.
seemed, Lynn, wouldn't it be reasonable to expect we'd do at least 6 months, right? I mean, 6 months on the
Yeah.
job to see how everything is going.
That's what I was thinking, Mary.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have no resignation since last month. You do have 1 unpaid leave request, and Rhoda, I wasn't sure. I know you were away at a training. I wasn't sure if you were going to make it into this meeting or not, so I put it under mine. But do you want to go ahead and share with them the details of this?
Sure, I can do that. So first of all, I want to apologize. I was unaware that I needed to bring this to you, so I had granted this unpaid leave, and so that was my mistake, and I apologize for that. Unfortunately, the leave is for tomorrow, so I'm putting you kind of in a crazy position, and like I said, I apologize for that. It is for Kendra Pillsbury. She is getting married, and she's asked for 4 days, so one of them would be an unpaid leave. And they're all related to, family coming in and getting prepared for that wedding and a little bit of a trip after it. So I'm hoping that you will approve that. There is a letter that she wrote asking for that.
So I have the letter, and what she's requesting. She's getting married on October 10th. She'll be out of work on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th, and 13th. They get 3 personal days, so this puts her 1 over her personal days. So she understands that it would be an unpaid day, and she would appreciate that you consider the request so that she can enjoy her wedding weekend.
Thoughts from the board?
Yeah.
I don't have any concerns about that.
I don't either, especially with all of the work that they've been doing, putting things online and communicating with families and students. I'm rest assured that, all of the duties that need to be done in those 4 days are taken care of just fine, even if she didn't have a sub, which, congratulations to her.
I think my only concern is we're not setting a precedent. Like, we've done this in the past, right, Lynn? Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Then do we need a motion for this?
You do need to approve the leave. I get to approve the support staff, but you need to approve the professional leave.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the unpaid leave request of Kendra Pillsbury?
I can make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. By roll, John?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes.
Well, there she is. Lisa?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So I'm going to apologize in advance. My report today is really heavy with data. So I'm sharing out several kind of data points this month. The first is around the goals that we set. We've talked a lot over the last 3 years about the importance of attracting and retaining teachers in FNESU. So we've been studying that data pretty hard. And I think you all know, as board members, we've used that data for a variety of, in a variety of ways. And, one of the ways we've used that data is around teacher negotiations and, strategies for finding ways to attract more teachers to come into FNESU, like the work we're doing with UVEI for teacher training programs and such. So this is the latest version of your teacher retention data. Morgan has been tracking this, Morgan, 4 years now, correct?
Right.
Or this is our 4th year tracking it. So the trend line looks pretty similar, that when this is what we learned when we first started analyzing this data. This is a compilation of over that 5-year period or 4-year period. It is still within the first 4 years of employment that teachers are leaving FNESU at the higher rates. So that continues from this data to be where we need to be focusing our energy in terms of retaining teachers. Next, Morgan has done a nice job of looking each year at the seniority level of teachers within each building, and I'm giving you a snapshot of the 4 schools in NMV, so I'll give you a little bit to take a look at that data. Again, a veteran is a teacher with greater than 5 years experience. Is how we're measuring it.
Lynn, have you, this is me kind of interjecting here. I'm looking at my data and there's some things that pop up in my head too about what this breakdown would look like if we broke it down by like whether it was like what kind of content we're talking about, like your ELA department versus math department. Do we ever do anything like that at this level?
No, I haven't done that, Lenny, because for the most part, we don't have a lot of duplicates in these smaller schools. You might have 2 in your middle school, but you're generally self-contained in a lot of our schools.
The other piece to this, Lenny, which might make your numbers or your graph make more sense to you, is that we're not doing anything. We're not trying to alter it by FTE either. So like you and Sandy share 2 staff who are both in the veteran category, but you only have them half-time. So that I imagine that we could pull it out by just classroom teachers, but we haven't done that.
So these are licensed professional staff.
Correct.
That we've been tracking over time. I don't think it would be a bad thing to look at that data that way, Lenny, if that's something that maybe you are interested in digging into at your individual school. Are you suggesting compiling the 4 towns and looking at it in terms of?
No, and I probably could have just kept my thought to myself. I was just, when I looked at that and I saw that I have veteran 50%, I was, not that I was taken aback because obviously I do know my data, but then when I think about like my core content math instruction or core content ELA instruction, I don't think to myself that half of my ELA teachers are veteran teachers or half of my math teachers are. And it's not that anything's being deceiving here, but I realize like a lot of those veteran staff members are like my unified arts teachers. So it's just one of those things where I look at that and there is some information that I'm thinking behind my head about like how we're still kind of working on having more veteran staff or more experienced staff in our ELA and math content areas.
It might be interesting in the future to look at it through the lens of classroom teachers, though, like Morgan is saying, because it would get you not just at the ELA and the math, but at all of your classroom teachers, and then have your electives teachers in a separate graph. But I do hear what you're saying, Lenny.
And I'm looking, Lenny, at your underlying data while Lynn's presenting, and everybody on the right half of that circle, so 1st through 5th, they're all classroom teachers. And so all your unified arts folks are in the veteran category.
I think it would be just interesting information to see that compiled with all 4 schools. Looking at the middle school content and then the classroom by grade, just to see what that looks like and where those areas are that need a little bit more of a push or a bump.
So Aaron, you're saying reporting out maybe, are you saying by like K through 4, but merge the data? Or are you talking about first grade with merged data?
I mean, I'm just because my mind is middle level anyway, I just would be interesting to see where are veteran teachers when you're talking about math, science, language arts, but it would be interesting to see is, you know, do we have, you know, do our first grade teachers, I would just be interesting to see by grade level as well across the 4 schools so that you're still confidential in what's going on.
Right.
And I think the real reason why I kind of popped up to say this is thinking, one, I was thinking about thinking forward for budgets, and I'm not saying anything now, but I know we've talked about my school, and I think a couple other schools have talked about how we constantly have that need for like instructional coaches, and a big piece of that need is because we have so many non-veteran staff in those core content areas. And then I look at this chart, and not that this chart's misleading per se, but this chart wouldn't really, in my opinion, reflect the amount of need I have around those core content area instructional practices, and wanting to find ways to maybe increase the capacity of my school, which is why we talk about things like having those interventionists and maybe having instructional coaches to help, because we have so many teachers who are pretty new in those core content areas.
I think that's a good point, Morgan. I think that would be something that we could bring back for next time.
Yep, we can certainly do that.
By we, he knows I mean
Mm-hmm.
he can do it.
Lynn, I wonder if you have had an uptick, or like in the last 6 months, did you have an uptick in resignations that threw your data off? Like so many things that are, you know, in parentheses because of COVID, like do we discount a year in your data collection because everything got thrown off by COVID?
I'll say what my impression is, and then I would love Morgan to say his as well. My reaction to that, off the top of my head, Jean Marie, I don't think our professional staff, we've seen an uptick there. I definitely think if we were tracking support staff, that's where we got hit the hardest, because we lost substantial numbers of support staff members. Morgan, what do you think?
I would agree with that completely. You know, we had at the onset of this extended to the teaching staff the ability to retire, even though they had not given us notice in time. And we were speculating we'd have a half dozen people taking that, and none of them did. So, so I think that the teaching staff has not really moved because of that, but we certainly do have a lot of paraprofessionals who have, and I think part of that is COVID, and part of that is the AB schedule. And you certainly had people who were taking those jobs because it worked with their kids being in school, and the hybrid model has kind of thrown that off.
Yep, that makes total sense to me.
So another way that we just take a look at, you know, what's happening is we try to check in with the people who leave NMV. And last year when we looked at this data, the board, I think it was the SU board, or one of the members on the SU board brought up the idea of, could we, instead of just doing the electronic survey, set up exit surveys so that they get to have an in-person talk with me? And that was my intention, but with COVID, it just didn't happen. Even to try to fit in a remote, I did have one person that wanted to talk to me, and we just couldn't make the schedule work with all that was going on. So what I'm giving you is raw data. I do have some narrative information that I'll have Courtney email out to you so that you can read some of those comments as well. So we did send it out. We probably lost closer to 30 teachers. We had 17 responses, so a little over half. You can see there were some from most of the schools who responded. All were people who left this year. When we're looking at the reasons, because that's what we've been trying to unpack, this year, most of the people said it was geography, that they were relocating. We had almost 30% talk about compensation. And I don't have the master, so I can't tell you what this says. When Courtney sends this to you in a different format, I'll make sure that that language is in there. So I don't know what that is. And definitely, clearly, people are talking about workload and expectations. It is a tough time to be a teacher. There is a lot on them, and there's a lot they're managing in their classrooms every day. So you'll be able to see that the different compensations when they leave, this is clear on the copy that you'll get, that they were offered, I'll start here because it's the only yellow one, between $1,000 and $24.99 more than they were in FNESU. And this would be between $2,500 and close to $5,000 and so on and so on. So you can see that there's 17% that were between $5,000 and $7,500 more. So I'll make sure that that's all evident to you in your copy. Are there any questions on the teacher retention part of the data?
Well, we can't move the SU, so those 10 people, we can't fix that.
No, we definitely, and you'll see in some of the comments, there were people that were talking about cost of living in Vermont and how they're being drawn out of state because they have the capacity to have a lower cost of living, is one of the comments, and they hope to return. And there were a couple people who said, if I am able to return to Vermont at some point, I do hope I land back here. So it was good feedback. It was helpful to see, and there's definitely some lessons to be learned in some of the comments as well. Okay, now we have to take a look at October enrollment numbers every year, and with COVID, these look dramatically different than they typically look. So what I've broken down for you is just the NMV side of this data. So we're reporting out for the year, it's a comparison. So this October 19, we're taking a look at last year's numbers compared to this year. So Bakersfield finds themselves up 1 student. We have lost 26 students in Berkshire, 19 in Montgomery, and 6 in Sheldon, for a total of 50 students this year. So it is a big, scary number, and this is why it was so important that the legislature take up the hold harmless piece around ADM, which they did. So thankfully, your ADM is not going to be less than it was last year, to protect people from the ramifications of this pandemic. So the reality is we're still getting information from the Agency of Education about the numbers of students who have approved homeschool plans. I know that office is pretty short-staffed at the agency, so they're several weeks behind in terms of processing those homeschool plans. So we hope that by the end of the month, I'm hopeful, we'll be able to have a clear count to make sure that everybody is accounted for with approved plans. So these numbers also, just so you know, include the students who are in our virtual academy or our remote learning programs. They do not include students in homeschool programs. So if they applied for an approved homeschool program, that is why we're seeing some of the loss. And there's also kids who have moved as well.
I suspect some of the other COVID-related loss, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at the pre-K numbers, they are down, and that is, I'm guessing, in part due to capacity and us not being able to take those kids in yet.
Yes.
Lynn. Sorry, Lynn, could you clarify what you said again? You said the change from 19 to 20 includes or is indicative of homeschool students, but not the ones that are remotely learning in our virtual academy. What about VTVLC?
So the VTVLC, our virtual academy, those are still our students. So they're reflected in these numbers over here. The loss of students only represents the number of students who unenrolled from public school.
Thank you.
So you have to unenroll to do the homeschool plan. So this is a reflection of both students who have moved and students who have enrolled in homeschool.
Can I say something too, Lynn?
Yeah.
Just in the Bakersfield numbers, we're up one student, but we actually are up more than that. But we also have students who chose to be homeschooled. So there still is a loss there, even though it doesn't really look like it, because we actually gained, I want to say 5 different families this year, but that's not reflected there.
That's a great point, Rhoda.
Lynn, I have a quick question. So the hold harmless from the legislature, that's just for this year owing to the COVID situation.
Yes.
So so next year, if we are still having this level of kind of student like drop in numbers, then our ADM is we're going to feel it next year, this loss of 50 students.
My understanding, and we have a legislator on our board, luckily, so she can tell me if I'm wrong. My understanding is it was approved for this year so that our ADM would not be less than last year's. My suspicion is, and I don't even want to say this out loud because I think we're all pretty ready to see some hope for coming out of this pandemic. And I hope at this point, next fall, we're not in the same situation with COVID. So if we're not in the same situation with COVID, I would like to think that we would get some of those families who chose homeschooling who would want to return to public school. If we don't get all those students back, you're right, Mary, that's when we will feel the ADM drop. That's when we'll feel the impact unless the legislature takes it up next year. But for what they did this year, it's only going to protect us for this year.
And then do you know, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of different reasons people are kind of deciding to homeschool, but for the ones, you know, in all the towns over the years, there's always a handful of families, and obviously there's been this enormous uptick. So I'm assuming, like, are we in touch with those families? Like, have any surveys gone out to say, we're curious, you know, why, and if we get to a point where you know, what were your concerns that led you this year in particular to choose homeschooling, that would give us a sense of if we're going to welcome them back in to the public school in next year or subsequent years?
We have not done that, Mary. I think that's a great idea. I think that we're still trying to get a sense of, so all we know, because we don't have the approved homeschool plans yet, is that they're not in our schools. We don't always know that. I mean, they're supposed to let us know that they have a homeschool application in, but we don't know that they're approved and officially a homeschool student until we get that from the agency. So what the worry is we hope we can get that soon and just make sure that we're not missing anybody in between who's showing up and who's on the approved homeschool plans. So I think it would make sense for us to look at doing that once we get the solid data from the agency, and then we can use that to maybe anticipate impact next year.
Yeah.
I'd like to add, just because it'll come into play once we start getting into the budget, that you know, it's great that we've got this year of hold harmless. There are a lot of other factors that go into the calculation of the equalized pupil number, which is the number that impacts your tax rate. I've not read the law that was just passed yet, so I can't really talk about how that would happen. But I think just because the ADM is going to stay the same for this year, it doesn't necessarily mean that your equalized pupils won't go down or won't go up because of what happens to the year that drops off or what else is happening statewide. So just folks should keep that in mind when we come to you in December and the equalized pupil numbers are a little different.
Do we know how many of those 50 are have chosen homeschool?
We don't yet, Christy. We're still waiting on those final reports.
I was thinking, just when I'm looking at my numbers, so we were down 6, and we have 4 students who attended last year and are and went on homeschool plans this year. And 2 of those are already coming back, right? Which is kind of interesting. And had we been able to have more of our preschoolers come, we would have been up in numbers. So it's just, it is very interesting to really think at each school, like, how much are you really down, right? And Rhoda spoke to that a little bit ago.
That's a question.
Yeah,
I was
that's a
wondering.
good point that I didn't mention, that 50 really does have to account for that, the preschool too. So
And I wanted to add that too, because I'm looking at my list of students that I had on my roster that I started marking whether they were going to the homeschool or to the remote. I only show 11 that went remote and 11 that went homeschool and 7 that went remote. And I'm thinking maybe there was maybe some of those homeschool numbers are kids that have always been homeschooled. I don't know. I'm trying to add it up and make sense of it, but
I think we have some work to do before we can unpack that number to really make it make sense to us. We just don't have the right data yet.
Do we have any sort of indication of how many preschoolers this would be? Like, that aren't supposed to be in the list, but aren't because of where we're at right now? Even just a rough estimate?
Principals, is that something that you could answer?
my number was pretty small because our numbers were small enough that we were able to bring 3-year-olds in. I know that some of the other schools, as we were talking as principals, were having a hard time because they couldn't even invite 3-year-olds. So I think I'm kind of that smaller number person that.
Yeah, our numbers are small as well. So we have both 3 and 4, but I think there are probably about 3 or 4 families that I know of who didn't come in, just chose not to because of everything going on.
I would say mine is about the same, that they chose because of the COVID or something, chose not to send them this year.
We have 10 or 11 that we were not able to place. So whether they might have chosen something different or not, I'm not sure. But we had to put them on a waiting list.
And I think we had a pretty small preschool turnout, both for pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, just around the COVID concerns and mask wearing concerns. We have been trying to reach out to 3-year-old preschool families to see if they want to come in now that we've realized we could fit a few more in, and we've only gotten a response from 2 families so far.
So the reason I share the October 1 enrollment is because this is the number the state uses. It's an important day in public education. You lock in like what your enrollment numbers are, and that feeds a lot of the calculations for this year based on whatever our enrollment numbers are then. So I think you just heard the principals allude to people coming back. What we're finding is, Jean Marie, you said it at the start, and I knocked on wood, that I feel like people are looking at what's happening in the schools, and there is maybe an increase in comfort level that we have some good systems and procedures in place, and we're taking our safety measures very seriously, and we're seeing families choose to return from the fully virtual option back to in-person. So I think we'll maybe continue to see that shift as we move forward, hopefully, that people will be more comfortable. And, I know that Sandy just mentioned that 2 of the people who were originally planning to homeschool have chosen to come back. And I'm wondering if that'll be a pattern we see too as we continue to move forward. And the masks were a big deal in August and July. People were really, not thinking kids were going to tolerate the masks. And I got to spend some time in Montgomery yesterday, and it was fantastic to see how well all of the kids were doing with the masks. And, I think that we maybe underestimated our kids and what how resilient they are. And I think that in some ways, they're so excited to be back that the masks aren't even something that most of them really think about anymore. So.
Yep, I've heard that over and over again, like how resilient our kids are and how we as adults were like, oh my God, you got to wear the mask all day. And the kids like, ah, meh, like big deal. Like just is what it is, you know.
Figuring
I'm
it
glad
out.
for that. Yeah.
Seen them playing soccer with them on. They didn't care. They just want to be out there playing soccer.
True. Okay, so another piece of the data, you got your individual principal class size reports, and I took them and made a summary report for you. So each year I need to bring this to you as per policy. So within your policy, you have set a minimum average per class size of 10. I sent you a copy of the policy. I also sent you a copy of the education quality standard in your board report where it talks about class size. So you're in a position where your class sizes are in a good place. You don't have any that are really under your 10 in terms of your minimum average, and you don't have any that are really over that threshold. So in the EQS and in policy, it talks about the average. So it's looking at those grade clusters. So it doesn't mean that you might not have one class that has more kids that goes above the threshold, but you when you average it out in terms of the number of classes you have, you're in a relatively good position. Any questions on the overall class size report? I took a screenshot and I forgot to move my cursor. Sorry about that. Okay. I think I'm overwhelming you with data tonight. So I'm almost done, I promise. So the VSBA annual meeting is coming up. I tipped you to that at your September meeting. So I sent you out a copy of the proposed resolutions along with a video. That was the first time I'd seen a video like that. I think maybe it might be the first time they've done a video like that, or maybe I've just missed it in the past, but it was pretty helpful to hear why the boards put forth the resolutions that they did. So they're at the annual meeting. It'll be held remotely on October 29th at 5. One of your board members will need to be given voting authority to vote on behalf of the board. Let me just check something.
Did we not do that? We appointed Mary, did we not?
Was that for the SU maybe?
I think she was going to do the informational meeting. And now, as soon as I just said that out loud, Jean Marie, that's what I'm double checking. Is that
I don't think that I was formally, we said we would do the formal appointing at this meeting after
okay.
last meeting. I did listen in to the webinar that the VSBA did and took notes and on all the resolutions. And I'm certainly happy to attend on the 29th at 5. I did have one. I had one that confused me a little, and I wasn't entirely sure I was in agreement with the VSBA position, but I may be misunderstanding it. So I thought if we wanted to go through them, we can.
Yeah, I want to back up a little bit. There's an error on this. It isn't that the NMV board is going to appoint, it's that the FNESU board is going to appoint. As soon as I read it, I realized my error. For VSBA, we get a voting delegate for the SU, not for each local district. We are going to appoint a voting delegate for the VSBA VHI annual meetings, but not for VSBA. So you have members of this board who serve on the FNESU board. So I think it's important for us to take a quick look at those resolutions and just have a conversation so that if your SU representatives, which are Jean Marie and Mary, and I'm struggling to remember the third one.
Emily,
of course. So Jean Marie and Emily and Mary can take your thinking back to the SU board so you can have a conversation with whoever the voting delegate is there as well. So I'd like to just take a minute to go through the resolutions. I think there are many fewer than there have been in the past. So here are your resolutions. Your first one is from Burlington. Did anyone have any questions or concerns about this one, and this was about school boards being able to remove or replace a board officer after they're elected via a fair and judicious process. How do you want to go through this? Do you just want to stop when there's one that you disagree with, or do you want to go through one by one?
I did the webinar and read through it again here. I had a couple questions about 5B. The other ones, I felt peaceful with the VSBA stance on. I'm not, of course, it would be helpful to hear from others. This one confused me, and I'm unsure about whether I agree with the VSBA agreement of passing this one. I wanted to clarify, Lynn or Morgan, maybe you know, or if someone else has a different take on it, whether they are suggesting that we no longer hold our meeting in advance of March voting, the in-person meeting. And last year we held it, the informational meeting that we held last year in Montgomery, the year before in Berkshire, that we agreed we would move around. And I just may be misunderstanding it. So I'd love for someone to give me their read on this.
I don't think I read it that it was taking away your informational meeting. I think it had to do with conducting a floor vote in this section here that I'm looking at. So I think what they're saying is, for example, you have 4 towns, and if you weren't voting by Australian ballot, which you do, you're voting by Australian ballot. If you were doing a floor vote and it was only being held in Berkshire, I think the objection is this was brought up. I remember the person saying we're 200 square miles, and if it's only in one town, that town gets more people there that night to actually vote. But maybe I'm missing something.
And I also think,
and I think you're right, then. I think you're right, Lynn. I'm which is good. I mean, that's what I didn't want to have happen. I think I kind of read it in reverse as far as what their ask is.
And I didn't see the webinar, but I think one possibility that they may be trying to deal with is if we were going out to do say a bond vote in Sheldon now, I don't think you could have the actual Australian ballot vote until you had a district-wide vote saying that we want to have the Australian ballot vote. So I don't think it's necessarily just the annual meeting.
So Morgan, this section here, engage the voters by Australian ballot without first having to bring them together for a meeting to decide that they can make decisions by Australian ballot.
Right.
and I think concerns with COVID too, that you maybe are not going to be able to get a meeting in individual districts and to conduct a floor vote.
But are we saying, though, that if we agree with that, that we are then not having, we decided collectively that we would rotate. I'm kind of focused on the budget vote, in March. I know, Morgan, you're saying there are other instances where the issue may arise. But are we saying then that we would kind of forego with first having at least the informational meeting where we then, yeah, that's what I'm just, this be it resolved. I just don't want to then not have some way that we gather the 4 towns.
So you don't actually vote at that meeting though on your budget, Mary. That is.
No, I know that. We now vote by Australian ballot, but we at least have that opportunity to kind of discuss the budget. We vote on a couple of the preliminary items that appear on the warning, but I understand we're not we no longer vote from the floor the way we used to in our individual, respective towns when we had individual budgets. But I'm wondering, is this going to then kind of override the informational meeting, or are they separate?
The way I'm reading it is that this resolution is giving the option to engage voters with the ballot questions without first conducting the district meeting. So it's offering that as a potential. It's not saying that you have to or don't have to have that district meeting in order to make the decision. It just seems as though they're still giving the option. And towns can do it what they choose, is how I'm interpreting it.
Do you
The other
think,
thing to-
Emily, that the district meeting that they're referring to is connected to the decision to use Australian ballots? Or are you thinking it's connected to any district meeting?
I think one other way to look at it is that really what this resolution is doing is saying that the legislature should revisit 172680. And, if you're saying that happens, it's going to be up to the 14 people in that committee to figure out what they want to put on the table. So it's not like this is going to get pulled out and plugged into statute.
So I pulled up that statute and it says that unless specifically required by statute, the provisions of the Australian ballot system shall not apply to the annual or special meeting of a municipality, which a school district is a municipality, I believe, unless that municipality at its annual meeting or at a special meeting called for that purpose votes to have them apply. So I think this is just removing, getting people together in person to decide that they are allowed to use Australian ballot. So it particularly, I think, pertains to towns that still use floor votes, which we do not for our school meetings and our budgets. So I think this is obviously written statewide, and I forget which school district this comes from. Could you scroll?
Mount Mansfield.
Mount Mansfield. So I think there might be 1 or 2 towns that still do floor meetings, and this is trying to bring everybody on the same playing field. But that's just my take on this. I know that there were some emergency laws passed that as long as the state of emergency lasts, towns and municipalities and school districts do not have to have in-person votes. But however long that's going to last is going to depend on the state of emergency. I have a suggestion. If Mary really wants to get to the bottom of this, you could contact the Mount Mansfield School Board and speak to them, because they brought forth this resolution, to see what really their reasoning behind it is.
Or Sue Saglowski, for that matter, who could let you know if this would make it so that we didn't have to have the annual meeting in advance of the Australian ballot vote. I think that could get that clarified.
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to Sue. I mean, that's my concern, because I think that it's a really important part of the process. It's never going to quite encapsulate what we had before merger, but I think, people came out, we had good discussion. I think it's really important. I like where we landed around rotating it for kind of equal access through the towns each year. And I wouldn't be behind this if somehow this passes and then we're not allowed to, but that's, I'm not, and maybe it's just then it's kind of optional and we can maintain our status quo, which I think is a good has been a good kind of balance and compromise. But, and it may not even make a difference if we don't vote on it, because I believe it's the, you know, if the majority, if no one else, any of the other districts that are approving these, and we aren't, it's likely we would be kind of outvoted anyway on it. But I don't know. The legal language is a little awkward to fully understand. Like, what are they getting at with this one? It's the only one that kind of didn't quite resonate with me.
So Mary, can you try to do that and be ready for that at the SU meeting next week?
Yeah, I'll reach out to Sue and ask her to clarify that for me.
Were there any other resolutions that people wanted to talk about or ask about? You do have the board recommendation from the VSBA. Were there others that you disagreed with?
I felt fine with all the others. They made sense. I kind of support the VSBA position other than this 5B.
So are you all okay with me moving on to the next section? Okay. So maybe if you just look over those again and you do see something that stands out to you that you just want to weigh in on, would it be okay if Emily, Jean Marie, and Mary, if they reached out to one of you?
Certainly.
Okay, so we will make that appointment at the SU meeting next week, not at this one. However, there are two other meetings. Usually all three of these meetings happen at one conference, the VSBA Fall Conference, and that conference isn't happening. So now there are three separate meetings happening all on different nights. So I will need this board to appoint a voting designee to attend the remote VSBA annual meeting on the 22nd of October, 3:30.
I'm fine doing it if people want me to be the designee, but I'm also happy to let someone else have that distinguished honor.
I would like to move that if Mary is willing to do that. I know I cannot make any of these, so I'd be happy to have someone else do it.
Are you okay with that, Mary?
I am. That's totally fine.
Okay. Thank you so much. Do we have to vote on that? Vote on her as a designee?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to need, how am I going to do the signature, Morgan? Because I have to submit these proxies.
Jean Marie has to sign it.
Okay, so we'll, after the meeting, Jean Marie, maybe you and I can figure out how I'm going to get these to you. Maybe I bring them to Bakersfield.
Yeah, or you could scan them to me. I can sign them and send them back to you tomorrow.
I don't, maybe, but they're the colored, specific colored voting documents.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be around on Friday. I could swing over to the school and sign it on Friday if you want.
Okay, so you should, I think you should make a motion to appoint.
Mary. Lisa, I think you made that motion. Yeah.
I did.
Do you want to do 2 for 1? And
Yes.
You don't have to do your role.
Yes, I make the motion for Mary to attend both meetings for us.
Can you do that, Mary? I know you volunteered for the first one.
Yes, I can do both of those.
Okay, by roll, John?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
And Mary?
Yes.
Okay.
The last thing that I'm going to talk about, I sent you message so that you could see just the tip that this was coming. The expanding the in-person instruction time for younger students. So there are benchmarks that we've been using, and this is how we're assessing whether or not we're ready. And I shared these with you a couple of months ago, and they continue to, or maybe a month ago. I lose track of time in COVID. They continue to be the benchmarks. We think they're the right way to look at this, is making sure that we're keeping track of that COVID infection rate and whether or not the Department of Health and the agency feel like it's the right time for us to return, which they do. Our staffing structures, we are, I've communicated that with you. We are going to slowly return our students to in-person learning. We still are tentative in some of our staffing structures, and we are needing to hire some people to fill some empty positions. But we're going to be stepping forward strategically and slowly so that we think we can be okay moving forward. Our routines are well established and have been practiced, and certainly there will be some modifications that'll need to be made as we welcome more students back. So this process is over a 3-week period beginning on October 19th, and generally the timeline is going to be K1 first, then 2-3, then 4-5, but we do have some classroom structures that make that not completely work for people. So some people have like a 3-4 multi-age, so their school might vary slightly depending on the grade configuration. But otherwise, we're doing it across that 3-week period. Anybody have any questions on that? Erin?
When does this become public?
It is now.
It is now. I remember that. When does it become, like, when will each school know? Like, do you know what I mean? When, never mind.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. The principals, I didn't give them a specific date, but we talked about this. We met on Monday and finalized our decision. And I think their intention was when I got mine out, they were going to try to be soon after. So principals, is it fair to say within the next day or so? Maybe get that information out to families. Okay. So I do want to say I used a different way to upload my video this time. I've been uploading to YouTube, and I tried to do it right from the app because it was quicker and I was struggling with internet access, and now people can't access it because apparently there's a threshold of views. So it is, if people are complaining that they can't see the video, I will fix it, but I need some tech know-how that I don't have. Someone's going to help me tomorrow. Okay. Any other questions on that or anything on reopening?
Yeah, Lynn, I was wondering if you had heard like what the feedback was from parents. And I'll tell you, like, I have chatted with parents in and outside of the district, and almost everyone's like, oh, thank goodness, I'm really excited. Like, my kids are going to will do better with the 4 days in person. Like, we all struggled with the home and trying to do virtual learning and so forth. But I think that the group that I'm most concerned with are sort of the lower income folks that are, like single moms that I feel like have patched the schedule, like who's watching my kid this day and then they're on the bus this day, like that part that now we're sort of tipping the apple cart over on them. So I haven't had conversations with those folks to know their feelings on that. I've been talking with other folks that have job flexibility and have supports around them that have made this easier. But those sort of high risk families are the ones that I've been most concerned about. Have you heard from them? Are they upset or happy?
We've definitely heard from lots of families. And before we made this decision, I surveyed all of the staff and the principals, and we surveyed the families to just get a sense of if we were able to return more students to in-person learning, how would you feel about that? And a really high number of those parents said, yes, just get the kids back to school. Like they want them back. But with anything that's going on in our world right now, there's two sides to every decision. So there's also a population of people that don't feel comfortable yet, that feel like, have we really done this long enough for us to be ready to have more students back? And when you have all the students back, that's a lot of students, and it's going to be more students, more exposures. And so there are people who are worried. I won't sugarcoat it. I mean, there are people that are thrilled and wish we could just say, open the floodgates, bring back the middle school and the high school and everybody. But the guidance hasn't changed around our older kids. So the flexibility that we have in the shift in the guidance came with our younger kids so that we could bring them back because the distancing requirement was reduced. So I do think that for the most part, Jean Marie, people are supportive, and we did keep the Wednesday, and we feel like we need the Wednesday to be able to meet the expectations in the master agreement for prep time for our teachers, because they are having to do a whole lot more in terms of, you know, when they have to be in their room and, you know, shifting things around. So we will keep Wednesdays at least for now. And I think that it's probably welcome for working families that there are 2 more days of childcare that they're not going to have to pay for right now. Is there another question? I feel like I heard somebody else.
I had a question about like the shared spaces, like cafeterias and gyms, and with the step 3 aspect. So is everything remaining as is, or is that building to building as far as like students still eating in the classroom?
So we have some flexibility, Catherine, but it is not the flexibility you might think. So we could choose to have some PE classes, really limited PE classes in our gym, but it would require disinfecting in between and an hour wait in between groups, which it would be tough to disinfect a gym in between groups. And it is, our classes are more back to back. So there may be some usage of our gyms. It has to be really low impact, like a yoga or a, you know, some sort of a dance, not something that's going to get them overly exerted. So some schools may choose to do that within those guidelines, but for the most part, I'm not sensing from the principals that they're going to shift quickly back to that usage, because the reality is also that those gyms are being repurposed. So teachers have no place in most schools to eat their lunch or to prepare their materials, because their workspace as a staff had to be closed as well. And we can't open those back up right now. But what we can do is use a big open space like a gym and have tables really far apart with barriers and, you know, cleaning and disinfecting supplies. So they're able to go prep in those spaces. And they're also, a lot of our gyms have storage in them right now because we've taken things out of classrooms to make more space for student seating. So I'm not anticipating that. In terms of the cafeteria, you have to keep those kids distanced in the cafeteria, facing in the same direction. So it'd be very limited the number of kids that you could actually fit into a cafeteria. So the principals have the flexibility to do it, and the state has said, well, but if it's working well in the classroom, maybe you just want to stay in the classroom, because it's the other thing is just knowing about what's going on in our cafeterias right now. There's a whole lot of materials. A lot of the cafeterias are also the gyms. So there's a lot of materials both for food prep and for storage that are in those spaces. So it is at the school level. We're not going to control that piece from the SU level, but I'm not hearing from principals that they have a plan to be doing that anytime.
Okay.
soon.
And is
I wanted
there?
to add, because
sorry.
of the meal, because of the piece of the cafeteria that's being used for the meal prep and all the meal deliveries, and we use a fogger, you know, using the fogger for the disinfecting, it seems like we would be contaminating some of that area for the meal prep, and it's a little worrisome to do that. So
No, that all sounds good. I mean, I think if it's working in the classrooms, that sounds great to just keep on doing that. And then just one other question, Lynn, is there a timeline for the return of grades 6 through 12, or is that just still not even like on the radar given the current guidance?
The guidance would have to shift, to be honest, Catherine. We don't have the square footage in our classrooms because those older students, the way they transmit the virus is different. So they're not reducing the square footage requirements for them. We still need that 6 feet. So until that guidance shifts, I can't predict a timeline because it's important to me that the student safety, as much as I want them back for the educational piece, the student safety has to be, student and staff safety has to be the #1 priority.
Thank you.
Principals, is there anything that you wanted to say about the gym or cafeteria? Was there anything different that you're thinking about those spaces?
I just, no, there isn't anything I'm thinking different about that. But I will say that lunch in the classroom has turned out to be a really nice thing. And while it creates a little bit more work for custodians, right, to pick up compost and recycling and food trash every day, both breakfast and lunch, it really has changed the lunch dynamic. And I was in kindergarten and I was chatting with Reagan Kelty, the teacher. And what's interesting is that the kindergartners are eating more. They're eating more of their food. So a lot of them bring lunch with them, but they're eating it all. And that has not ever been my experience in the cafeteria with kindergarten. And so it's been a nice shift. I don't know that everyone would want to keep it that way, but I really like it.
So that is all I have for you.
Lynn,
Christy brought up a point that I just wanted to accentuate. I think that I, on behalf of the board, want to go on record just thanking our custodial staff. I know they're going above and beyond. I know what the janitorial staff is doing in my workplace. And not only is it more work, it's more time consuming. You know, for that disinfectant to work, you have to let it sit there for some time. And so there's an art to that and a lot of extra work going in, just like Christy said. So I just want to thank them for all the work they're doing. You know, they always were the first ones showing up to open those buildings in the morning and the last ones to leave at night. And the expectations have gotten a lot higher. So please make sure that they know how appreciative we are of them.
Lynn, I just had a question about the families, however few in number, that the new Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, that either they're not comfortable with it or it doesn't work for them. How are you dealing with that? Is there an option for them?
So that's a tough one because I can't ask the teachers to manage a 2-day hybrid and a 4-day hybrid at the same time. It just would be impossible to be able to their pacing would be so completely different. It wouldn't be manageable. So one of the things we've said is we don't want students shifting back and forth between the virtual academy and in-person instruction. But at the same time, this is a significant shift. So we're looking at this as if there's a family that really can't, they're not comfortable with doing this, it would be a reason that if there was space, we can move them into the virtual academy. But the reality is we were very full, over full when we started with the virtual academy, and we've had some students move out. So we have some grade levels where we have space, but not all the grade levels. So I wish I had like a really good answer for you, but I don't. The answer really is the family's going to have to weigh out if there's space in the virtual academy and they want to go that way, or, you know, not that I want to lose more students to homeschool, but that is always an option for families as well that they have to consider if they're really not comfortable with the in-person piece.
And if I know I'm being difficult, if there's a family that doesn't have room for their child in virtual academy and does not want to homeschool using an approved homeschool program because they feel that they are not teachers, what do you do with that family?
I don't have another option for them in the public school right now. And that I know it feels like because we've created all these choices and we've had different ways that we've been able to provide education, like the spring looked different than it does now. We don't have that staffing capacity to create more kind of menu choices. We're really pinched right now with what we're already trying to accomplish. And it doesn't feel like a good answer because I'm always going to be an advocate for wanting to work with families and wanting to work with kids. But at the same time, the realistic part of my leadership brain is we can't do more with the less that we have right now. So this is what we can feasibly offer at the moment.
Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. I will say that those hopefully few families will remain a concern for me. And I hope it doesn't become a problem. I hope we don't have any of those families.
Yeah, I mean, I will say they were in the surveys and I had a few emailed, and I don't know, I haven't spoken with the principal since Monday, so I don't know if now that it's been released, if they're getting hit with a bunch of requests, but I will say that this is an issue across the state, Lisa, and our approach is not different from the other superintendents that I've spoken with. Just the capacity to create more options than what we have isn't there right now. But we will keep, trying to work with families for sure.
Okay, any final questions for Lynn? Okay. I think we can move on to the principals' reports. I had an opportunity to read them. Lots of good news in there, which I was glad to see. Any questions, comments, concerns for our principals?
I think I just would like to say that this is really like, now they've been in school for a full month and more. Our last board meeting, we thanked everybody for being so adaptable, but truly you've proven that this can be a success. So I'm much appreciative of all your efforts.
Thank you, Lisa.
I actually had just one question for Lenny's report, where it said K through 2 and 3 through 4. It basically sounded like all of them, or none of them rather, had remote learning devices. So I just wanted to clarify that that was the case. And so were they doing everything just 100% like, papers being sent home, or were they accessing like their parents' devices, or how is that being handled?
So we would have had enough devices if we were only focusing on our kids who were in the building. But when we had the shift to fully remote students, we had to make sure we provided them with devices. So in 3rd and 4th grade, back in, say June and July, we were envisioning that we had enough for 3rd and 4th grade so that they could take their devices home for their remote learning days. But then when we had to make sure we provided to all the students 4th grade and down who were in fully remote, we didn't have enough to send all of 3rd and 4th grade home. So right now, 3rd and 4th grade have devices in the classroom, so they're getting practice on using the different things that we do online, but they're not taking devices home. We are on a wait list to receive devices. The last time that our tech person checked in, Caroline checked in, it looked like end of October was supposed to be when we were going to be getting our devices for K through 4. But we're still kind of, I'm not really holding my breath on that because we've been told a few different times since way back in July, we'll get them next month. And then next month is 3 months from now. And then there's 5 million on back order and et cetera. And I think some other schools are in the same place. So currently K through 4 are having hard copy learning materials for their remote learning days.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think the folks that manufacture laptops and plexiglass are the only ones making a killing during this pandemic.
True
And
story.
hand sanitizer, right? Okay, other questions for our principals?
I just wanted to echo what Lisa said, you know, hats off, really. I mean, to everyone, administration, principals, staff, it's really extraordinary. It's been a pretty Herculean effort. And I think I'm really impressed with the systems, you know, getting this one thing that helps make this manageable are the good systems, the drop off, you know, I'm aware when I drop my student off and then there's a contingency if we're late. And, you know, it seems as though it's just all a pretty well-oiled machine by this stage of the game, which is incredibly impressive. So thank you all so much. I am looking forward to middle school getting back, I hope soon. That's my personal plug to the 4 days a week, but thanks so much all.
Okay, shall we move to Morgan then?
Thank you. Financial update, there's nothing much to change from what went out in your packet. Still no word on the audit. No changes to the budget development schedule. No change to my understanding of the COVID money. That's still a work in progress. I did tip you to the small schools grant. I've not seen the grant for last year hit our bank account yet. I was hoping to be able to bring that to you to this meeting, but as far as I've been told, we will be getting that soon. I don't know the dollar amount, but I'm guessing it'll be somewhere in the $75,000 range. And then we will also be getting that for this year, FY21. And so that will mean there's about $150,000 of income this year that we hadn't planned on, which is good news, especially heading into item B, which is the update on the Sheldon project. Christy mentioned that she's looking forward to finishing the outside of the school, and one of the last things standing in the way is approving PCO 42, which I sent out to you all by email shortly before the meeting. And this is to finish up the work to the roof where the entryway is for the school. That was another area where they did some demo, and the worker there who pulled the first board down got an unexpected shower because there had been some leaking that had been hitting that area and not escaping. So this would be over my authority or Jean Marie's authority to approve, and I can present it if anybody, or I can project it if anybody needs that. But the base work is $8,119, and then there's an amount added on top of that based on the materials that we would use to finish it. Christy and the architect picked red cedar, which will match the wood siding that's going on around the outside of the building. And of the 4 options that the contractor, or the 5 options that the contractor presented, that was the 4th most expensive, so close to the bottom in terms of cost. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but I'm hoping that we'll get out of this meeting with a motion to approve PCO 42.
Morgan, can you clarify at this point how far over budget the overall project has gone with this, including this latest change order?
Including this latest, I'm projecting about 73,000. I'm probably still projecting more expenses in architect and clerk of the works than we're actually going to see, but that'll give you a ballpark. And I would guess off the top of my head about 5,000 of that is really expenses that should be coming out of the general fund budget anyway, sort of a normal annual maintenance that comes up, but we did it through this project because we had the contractors on site.
Okay. And you said just when you first started that you're seeing some surplus in revenue, which will potentially is that where some of the money to cover these overruns is going to be pulled from?
Yeah, so that's kind of an easy place that I can see where it would be pulled from. We're starting the facilities manager position basically 4 months into the year, so there's going to be some savings there. I think I've told this board before that I don't really feel the need to worry until we get all that first round of tuition bills in, because that's really the big, the one area where you can see the biggest swings. We'll have that by next month. I've started looking at Enosburg Richford numbers and who they're going to be billing out, and I am not seeing any warning signs for you there. I think we'll maybe be down a couple of kids, although for those of you who remember back when we were single districts, there's a lot of jockeying when we get that student list and trying to move kids from one town to another. For us, it doesn't matter as much anymore because it's mostly moving kids between our 4 towns, which don't matter, but your principals may know of somebody that's getting billed out where there's actually a parent that lives in Enosburg or Richford, and then that kid doesn't become your responsibility.
Does anybody want to make the motion for the change order?
I can make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Emily. By roll, John,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and Mary.
Yes.
And I have 2
Thank you all.
others. I don't think I need a motion on either one. The first one is just tipping you folks that the SU board is responsible for the food service program, and they will need to make a decision at some point in the next couple of months around whether or not they should rebid the food service management contract for Sheldon or to bring that program in-house. Currently, Sheldon is being served by the Abbey group. We renewed that contract for this school year. We are unable to renew it for another year, so we will need to either put it out for a competitive bid or to bring that program into house. Dawn and I are going to bring some information to the SU board in probably November or December, we hope, to inform that decision. But really, because it's a decision impacting your school only, it would be good if there were any concerns with the Abbey, any concerns with giving up the Abbey, that you guys let your 3 SU reps know that now. My read is that we would not be able to bid out all of the schools into a food service management contract because the food service staff are unionized. And so it'd be taking positions away from the union. That's certainly something that if the SU board directed me to, we could pick that battle, but I'm not confident that we would win it. And I don't think there's a reason to take it on. We could also bid that contract out and then have Dawn kind of come up with a projection on what it would cost to bring it in-house. So it wouldn't be that she's necessarily bidding against them, but to give the SU board some comparison costs. And I know Dawn is lurking on the meeting as well, so I'll give her an opportunity to add anything to that. And then I think you guys can have a discussion and just give Mary, Jean Marie, and Emily some guidance on what you'd like the SU board to hear.
I guess Emily, we talked, I think you weren't at the SU meeting, the last one. There was a tech glitch, I think, that kept you from being there. And also Miranda, I mean, it would be helpful to hear from the Sheldon perspective, thoughts on the Abbey. How I don't know too much about the history and the relationship and how your families in the community, and Christy for that matter too, how they feel about how it's working or not.
I think I would be curious to hear Christy's take first, and then we'll go from there.
It has not been something that we have surveyed our parents about. So I would only be sharing parents who have spoken to me, and usually those are complaints, right? That's it. I don't think I've ever had a parent call and say, thank you so much for the food service that, happened today. So we, there's complaints, as you can imagine. Students don't like everything, and they have shared that. We've gone through a number of different food managers in Sheldon, and the service has really been impacted by who was running that kitchen. And so there's been years when it's been better than others. I think that there is a feeling amongst at least staff that we would like to use a lot more local products, and some fewer prepackaged things. Just because it meets guidelines doesn't mean that it's what we want students to have. So I think there's been that when I have gone with, when I have contacted Abbey management and with a concern, they've always responded.
So I'll jump in. Dawn is unable to connect to audio. It's our intention to come up with a survey is sometime this fall, winter, for kids and staff and parents in the food service programs in all of our schools. We had intended on doing this in the spring, and then COVID happened. It's a little unclear to me right now how useful that data is going to be, given how different everything is this year. But I think we'll at least be able to see some comparisons from one school to another. That said, I've had, when I've been in the buildings, a small number of staff come up to me and ask if that's something that can be changed. Again, I'll echo what Christy said, is that you tend to hear from the people who are having trouble, and you don't hear from people who are neutral or who like it. So people should be aware of that. But that's what I've heard. And then statewide, and I don't think this is just the Abbey, I think this is the other two food service management groups in the state, business managers saying that the more you complain, the better your program is, because they move managers around to the districts that complain the most. And that's probably an indication of the challenges that they're finding hiring good people the way that we all are.
I think moving forward, I would definitely be curious to hear the results of a survey to see how our families in Sheldon are feeling about the quality of the food. I think this, in terms of the Abbey, what they give to our Sheldon community on that level is huge. So our relationship is multifaceted, and if they're open and willing to hear feedback regarding less prepackaged, more local products, more nutritious, if they're open to that and they're willing to adapt that, I feel that I would like to continue a conversation with the Abbey if they can meet the needs of our students and families, because obviously their health and nutrition is what is foremost. But if there's a way that we can move forward with any concerns on the table, I'm sure that they would be more than willing to engage in that conversation and make changes. But like I said, what they do for our community, what the family does for our community is huge, and it's a relationship that's really, really important in our community with the family that runs the Abbey. That's my perspective on it. I'm definitely open to hearing other perspectives, but nutrition is first and foremost.
And this is something that I've never had to bid it out before, because we've had it in-house for my entire tenure. But my understanding is that you can put some pretty narrow guardrails in the bidding process around use of fresh food, use of local food, things like that. So that would be something that that if we go that route, the SU board would have the ability to define that in the bid specs.
So I just want to echo what Emily said about or maybe I'll just answer Christy about the use of local foods. I know there's been a big push for it all along in the last number of years, but in terms of delivering food to students during COVID, everything had to be prepackaged. And that really limits what any food service can offer. So I think we've seen less creativity during COVID around good, nutritious meals that kids are going to like. And I'm hoping that that will end eventually and we'll be able to go back to the way we were before. But truthfully, I feel that if you talk to your provider, whoever it may be, whether it's the Abbey or someone else, and sit down and lay out a plan for your students, I think that you'll have much better success than just taking what they give you. And I will echo what Emily said, that it's important to maintain those relationships within our community. And I do know just in recent times, in the last week, the Abbey has had some food products taken out of their control, so they can't provide local food in a particular program like they would like to, and it's actually coming from somewhere out of state, and that's really distressing. So I would hope that we could continue to deal locally as much as we can.
Lisa, is that related to the food distribution piece?
Yes, that's what I was hearing in the last week.
I would like to just see, regardless of who it is, like, I don't know, I just want to see consistency. So like, I would hate for the kids in Sheldon, because we're using that as this example, but to like not have fresh fruits, and then the other 3 schools, you know, are offering an array of fresh fruits and vegetables. So I just think regardless who it is, just having consistency for all of the kids and as healthy as possible should definitely be the goal.
I definitely agree. Just on record, we do have fresh fruit. I just want to say that. But I'm also wondering if is there a way, Christy, that maybe we could survey Sheldon parents, because this is the contract we're possibly having to bid out. So I'm wondering if we could just put something together for Sheldon parents and get the feedback. So when we are ready to have this discussion, we will have data from our community members and parents and kids about what they like to see, what they don't like, what should change. I think that would be really helpful moving forward in this discussion, because it could be a big discussion.
And I think we want to get that for all the towns, because you want to be able to compare it, because as you know, Christy mentioned, kids are maybe not the most reliable reporters on quality of food, for example. And so you want to be able to compare that across all 6 of our programs. So I think if anybody has any other thoughts on that, you could reach out directly to Jean Marie or to Mary or to Emily. And then that will be plodding along at the next couple of SU meetings. And then the last thing I have under other is that the Enosburg-Richford schools have asked, or the Enosburg-Richford board has asked me to bid out trash hauling services for all 5 of their schools. This is something that we've not normally gone out to bid unless there's been a problem that a principal has brought up. But I wanted to bring that to you and say, if you guys direct me to, I'll put your 4 schools on that bid. And if you guys are fine continuing on, I am perfectly happy to not add to that workload.
Do we all have separate different haulers now, Morgan?
I actually don't know.
Oh. My only real experience in this world has been in Chittenden County, and there's a aggressive market when you're talking about trash haulers, and switching one does not usually end up being an advantage to you. So we have stuck with ours for a long time, but maybe there is something to be gained in the numbers of the game.
Maybe I would say outside of a big urban area, there's probably not all that much to be gained combining the schools, but you know, the principals can certainly chime in if anyone's having trouble or would like it to be bid out, or is fine as is. The challenge that we're finding with bidding out things like plowing and lawn care as a larger district is that you've got a lot of contractors that are really only interested in doing it at one school or in one town, which makes the process a little more challenging, and it kills any benefit you'd think you'd get from a group bid.
I'm of the mind that if all the principals feel as though the current arrangements are working, that we stay the course. It seems as though you're so inundated with kind of larger issues we're trying to tackle right now that if it's working, I'm not sure there's really an advantage to trying to kind of do it in aggregate or bid it out across the district. And the nice thing is, as we see with some of in our individual communities, that we're able to support some of our local folks in each of the towns who has the trash hauling business and who has the plowing business. And I know in Montgomery, it's relatively local. I'm assuming it's this case for the other 3 schools. I'd kind of like to keep supporting people in our communities to help with these functions of running our schools.
So I'm fine. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm going to try to be coherent. It's late. My only thought with that is, and this might just be so minor, it doesn't matter. So just take my words with a grain of salt. But my only thought with that is that we had told when we were merging our communities that this was the area that we would look at finding cost savings by trying to combine services so that we could get a better deal and save our taxpayers money. So I'm just wondering, and I'm asking a question, is it worth just seeing, or is it like, if you put us in the bid just to see, are we like stuck in that bid? Or do they have to go out and bid it again for the other district?
So if you wanted to bid it, I would put them all out at once, and I would give contractors the option of bidding one town or a handful of towns or all the towns. You will likely get people bidding a mix of those. I think you know, we would word the bid document so that you are not required to take any of the bids, that you can choose on an issue other than price. But we're going to be opening those bids at a public meeting, and you're maybe politically on thin ice if you decide that, well, now Casella's come in and they're a little bit less than the 5 or 6 or 7 local contractors who could each do one or two towns. So that would be my only cautionary words to you. So if you're okay with it, I'll check in with the principals offline and kind of let them make the decision on whether they want to jump in on this bid or stay the course.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that as well.
And that is all I have.
Okay. Thank you so much, Morgan. Okay, we are at board business. Does anyone have any future agenda items they want to mention now? Okay. Then I guess I will see you all on November 4th. The good news is that we're having Halloween on the weekend. So all of these teachers are going to be so grateful they don't have like all those hopped up kids the next day in the classes, right? Have a wonderful Halloween. And I hope that all of the open houses, however they shape up, go really wonderfully for all of our principals and our teachers. Thank you all for your time and attention this evening. And if you will give me a thumbs up as you exit, I will take that as your agreement in adjourning at 8:25 this evening.
Thank you. Good night.